Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining. Oh, great. I see another person from Amsterdam. But yeah, we're super excited to have you all here for our GitHub Galaxy talk on security in the EMEA track. And we're going to be talking about how you can use our global community of security researchers to scale your security team. So I'm going to be one of your hosts today. I'm Senna. I am a solutions engineer. So I help customers in EMEA, in particular, get the most out of GitHub, whether that is about security or DevOps, productivity, authentication, you name it. And I'm based in Amsterdam, as I said before, and yeah, I have a background in front-end development, so I also know what it's like to be faced with security issues and not really know what to do. But I'm happy to be joined here by Nick, who's going to talk to us about security too. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll be super short and sweet. My name is Nick. I'm one of the directors here at GitHub dedicated to advanced security. Developer by background, mainly JavaScript and TypeScript. So any JavaScript and TypeScript developers in the audience, a big shout out. I'm based in Reading. And as I mentioned earlier, I am an avid golfer. So I am super excited to walk through, I guess, like generic open source security today. Really looking forward to the chat.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, some housekeeping things to go over for how we're going to use the Goldcast platform today. First thing, we recommend you use Chrome. If you can't see us, then try refreshing, but there's going to be someone in the chat that can help you out with that stuff as well. And the main thing I want to say, like our goal today is that we want to have a conversation and we really want to talk to you all. And there's a few ways we can do that. We do have a chat function, so you can chat with others. You can chat with our chat moderators, Richard and Babu. And we also have a video Q&A option. So you can ask questions, share your thoughts or your opinions. And by the way, if you're ever thinking that you want to focus on something really in depth, have like a specific conversation, there's a request to demo button on the top of your screen. And that'll take you through to a form where you can just fill some things out and we can get back in touch with you. Okay, on the video Q&A, so you can raise your hand with this raise your hand button. There's going to be times where you can do that and we'll have you come up on screen. And on video, actually, if you're comfortable. So we have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, but also at any time, like while we're talking and doing polls or talking about something that you find interesting or have a question, please don't be shy. We would love to have you on stage and talk with us. Because we want to learn from you and we want you to learn from each other as well. And that takes me to our first poll. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up this poll really quick in Goldcast because we really want to learn from you and what side of the business you come from and like what kind of perspectives you bring with you today. So yeah, let us know like which of these describes your team, and if it doesn't, like tell us some more about like what your team does in the chat because we'd love to learn about that.
We already have a few voters that like aren't one of these areas. I would love to learn more. So yeah, definitely please reach out in the chat. Physics, amazing.
Physics.
We have a lot of development. We have a lot of DevOps, DevOpsy roles. We also have a good few security. Oh, very nice. DevOps. Yeah, agreed. In a way.
Yeah.
Data, amazing. Product development manager, amazing. We have a very diverse audience today from a locations and also a job role perspective. We often see, I guess, software development leading the way with DevOps second, but it is really nice how we have a variety and like hopefully throughout the session we can get various people's thoughts on this.
Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody for joining in and telling us about where you, what kind of team you're on. I'll go back to sharing my screen again. Okay, awesome. Well, okay. As we go into our content, like I said, I would really like for this to be a conversation with you all. And what we're going to talk about today is open source and how we can utilize it with static analysis and software composition analysis. So given our like very diverse audience today, I see a lot of developers, a lot of different really interesting roles. I want to get a feel for how you all actually feel about open source. So anyone want to be our first guest on stage and talk about this and how you feel about collaborating with the open source community? Nice. I see that we have our first person volunteering. So Stamen, I'm going to approve you and have you come on up.
Go with Colif, please. It's I go with my last name.
Sorry
Never mind.
about that.
Right, my point is I do find the point of idealistic point of Richard Stallman, but that is somewhat again utopic. So should we say open source is the way to socialize the internet, the developers community, and the possibility to just generally develop together in collaboration, and everyone looking into their own mistakes and everyone looking into everyone else's mistakes and making something nice out of it.
Yeah, I think that's so. Firstly, thank you for coming on stage. I think like really good point. I think like the way that we think about open source mainly is how we can not, well, I would say not like look at mistakes, but more like learn from how other people do things, but also more work together. I think like there's a really good phrase that I will sort of like coin. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think like that's a key principle to how we think about like open source and why like working together in open source is going to get us far. Like we are as big as we want to be, and most I would say like organizations are X big. When you open source, you work as a bigger organization. So I think like almost one phrase to coin. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That would be a high level phrase to that question. But really good question. Thank you for coming on stage. And with that, I think Senna, should we get things kicked off?
Yeah.
Amazing. So I think as we go through this, we're obviously talking about open source, and it would be a very closed source thing to do to just be like it's me and Senna. So we want to run this session very open source as well. So again, like please, like whether it's about open source security, whether it's about like just general developer security, we have some DevOps people. Would love to get your thoughts either way. So please do come up on stage or ask your questions in the poll. In the chat. As Senna said, we're really going to focus this talk on the power of open source and making your organization's security team as big as it can get and what some of the values are in that. We're going to focus on static analysis and supply chain because they are two of the most relevant topics. But again, like come up on stage and we can go off in any tangent as long as it has to do with anything security or anything like open source. It's going to be absolute valid points, and we hope that you pick up on one or two useful nuggets of information throughout. So Senna, let's move on to the first slide. And
Alrighty.
I want to open up with a little bit of a quote, and this has really stuck with me throughout my like I would say career so far. I was at a DevSecOps conference in San Francisco talking about what makes a security tool a good security tool. And someone said this phrase, a great security tool, but with poor data, is just like driving a brand new shiny car, but with an old engine. It's going to look really, really good. And on paper, when you trial it, it's going to be amazing. But when you go to use it, it's really going to let you down. And I think like it took me a long time to really process what that meant. But like on a high level, like you can have a security tool with the best user experience, with like the best prioritization, and it will go ahead and prioritize your alerts. It will make everything really pretty. But if you don't have the right data in that tool and the data isn't top quality, what is the point of that experience? Like, everything is backed off of the data, the remediation, the coverage. And I think like that is why GitHub has really taken a broad focus on data and making sure our data is available in the open source. So Senna, if you can move on to the next slide. I think like that's why I really want to focus the majority of the SaaS and the SEA part, especially when it comes to the leveraging the global security teams on data and how we can leverage our open source security researchers to make data the best possible way as possible, so you can scale your security teams to meet global demand. So that is really going to be the high level crux of how I'm going to steer the high level conversation. So really opening up with the talk title and the description should give you a flavor for what we're going to cover. And out of this session, I really want you to come away with a few ideas where you're like, okay, I now understand why GitHub does this in this way, or hey, like this is a really useful idea that I can take back to my organization. So they are some of the key outcomes that I would love for you to take from this session. So that's just a little bit of framing. Let's dive straight into the static analysis space, Senna, if that's okay. So, and as you move on to the next slide, why are we talking about this? I think like one of the most interesting statistics that we have is, and this is probably relatable to a lot of you on the call, and please put in the chat if you see this in your organization. Developers have, and most likely always will, outnumber security teams. And the data really does prove that. There are about, for every 40 million developers, there's only about 70,000 security researchers and security personnel. And that means there's about 570 times more developers than there are security researchers. And that's why when we talk to companies, we often hear the phrase, we have 1,000 developers, and we also normally have about 10 or 20 people dedicated to application security. And that is the reality of today, is we have so many people that focus on software development. It is rapidly outgrowing the security world. And that's why it's so important for us, especially as a security team, to focus on how we can leverage and how we can make our team bigger by leveraging open source, but by doing it in a structured and I would say a rigid way where you can trust what you are using is past tests, it's valuable, and it's good information. But I think like just to set the level ground, like we are talking about this today because a lot of organizations, they come and they're like, hey, like we don't have the security people to actually scale to the number of developers we have out there. And that's why one of the main things GitHub has been focusing on is a tool called CodeQL in the static analysis space. So Senna, if you can move on to the next slide. For the people that don't know, CodeQL is a static analysis. It's a semantic analysis engine, and people often refer to it as a SAS tool, static analysis. And one of the key aspects of CodeQL is it allows you to query your code as data. So we can actually find vulnerabilities in your code, but by treating it as data and not as code. Now, we're not going to get into all of the technicalities, but one of the key aspects of CodeQL is it's a query-based engine. And what does that mean? Queries are able to be shared, reused, and collaborated on. So again, and that's why with CodeQL, we have fully open sourced our static analysis engine and all of its rules. So that's why you can go to github.com/github/CodeQL, and you're able to go in there and see all of our queries. Now, that brings tremendous value. And I think like one of the best ways to articulate this is how we have it on the next slide. I think this is a really nice example of why this works and why this can work for you. When you talk to a lot of security companies, their queries and their engine is really their secret sauce. But what it means is you can only move as quickly as me as a security organization, as quickly as my internal team. And obviously GitHub, we have a whole organization of engineers that are focused on writing queries and modeling so we can meet the OAuth top 10. We can meet the SANS 25, and we can do all of the basics, and we can make sure that we have queries that can support you. But why can't we take this further? Why can't we leverage the power of the open source to make sure that we can leverage community-powered queries? And that's why if you go to github.com/github/CodeQL and go to the Insights tab, you can actually see that GitHub has community-powered queries. So what that means is we don't have to work as quickly as our internal team can move. We actually move as quickly as the open source community can move in this space. So what that means is we may have one of our customers that goes, I've written a CodeQL query to solve this type of SQL injection with this library. I'm going to make a pull request and merge that back into GitHub. So every customer is able to get that query. And again, rest assured, it goes through all of our internal quality results. It will go through rigorous testing at scale. But one of the main reasons why we're able to scale and why the likes of Microsoft use CodeQL is we're able to scale not just as quickly as our internal team, but again, all of our customers. And again, because we're open source, you don't just have to believe me. You can go there and actually see on our repo by checking out the Insights tab. So that's why community-powered queries for you as a security organization or for you as a developer, again, we are able to model the most latest version of TypeScript, or we're able to get the latest queries because we are actually leveraging not just the 100 or 200 people we have internally, but the thousands of security researchers that actually come in and contribute. And in our open source Slack channel, we have over 2,000 people that are able to come in and are talking about CodeQL. We're building a community around security, so organizations are able to leverage that effectively. But what we also see is people going on top of that. Because we actually like open source our query writing, you as an organization are actually able to go out there and write your own queries, and you may decide to contribute them back. You may decide to keep them yourself. But again, you're making this a learning experience. You're building a community around security. So again, you as a 5 or 10 or 1 team security team, you are leveraging not just the 200, 300 people we have in GitHub dedicated to this. We're actually out there in the thousands, and you're leveraging the thousands of security researchers. Before we move on, Senna, are there any questions or thoughts we wanted to shout out from the audience?
Yeah, somebody did. I actually saw a really interesting discussion in the chat about how people are using LLMs and AI and how it can change the landscape.
Yes.
And Conrad also, you had a lot of thoughts, it seemed like, on open source. So feel free to come on and elaborate more on your question and your thoughts if you'd like to. And then in the meantime, I also saw a question about pretty basic, like, what do I need to do to use CodeQL?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. So in the spirit of open source, if you have a open source repo on GitHub, you're able to leverage CodeQL and code scanning for free. Maybe Richard or Babu in the GitHub side moderating the chat can drop a link for how to get started. But for any public repos on GitHub, you're able to leverage CodeQL for free. So you can come in and see your so you can like run security static analysis on your code base. So that's how I would get started. And I can see that someone again has joined the stage. Welcome.
Hi again. I had a bit of a question, like I something I'm actually like having a difficulty coping with regarding also my thoughts inside the chat box. I'm wondering if I was using hypothetically, a few years ago, and by few I mean about probably 2008, 2009, SQL injections, for example,
Sure.
just to penetrate systems, for example, high school systems and so on and so on. And then as a security vulnerability, that was an issue at the time, I believe. And again, these days, I would consider the use of this as a tool to transport data from one end of my memory to another end to the memory. How do I cope with that thought? Isn't that the duality of the idea a bit counter secure? And again, inside any wide area network, we just if you connect to the internet, there are vulnerabilities, and that's that. We just gotta like secure the container we contain whatever we're trying to do, which is the app in it. And then we just cooperate, right?
I think there's so firstly, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, don't.
I'm very interested in what you've got to say as a security researcher.
No, please don't be sorry. I think, like, to your point, there are many different types of security, and security has really changed, right, since 2008, where the likes of SQL injections were super common. Nowadays, things may be more like NoSQL, and you have like vulnerabilities have matured. I think and I'll piggyback onto that. Like, security changes frequently. Like, you have so many different types of vulnerabilities, and security is just moving at this rapid pace. And that's why I think leveraging a global set of security researchers, and that's why like almost being honest and actually like being like, yes, like my internal team, we can't keep up with this. And that's why we want to go forward with a capability, or we want to leverage a service that leverages the open source. Because just due to the fact that security is able to scale in multiple different vectors. So I think just due to the fast moving pace of security. And I think from the security researcher perspective, I've got a really interesting slide coming actually next. So Senna, if you want to move to the next slide. This is a feature that security researchers, I think, are going to be, and like security organizations are going to be super, super excited about. So a big problem with security, and let's use Log4j as an example, because I think everyone is used to Log4j and knows what it means, is when Log4j came out, there was this big panic of, okay, am I vulnerable? Where am I vulnerable? And you may be leveraging a supply chain tool to tell you you're using a vulnerable package, but are you actually using what is vulnerable in that in Log4j? Like, are you using the vulnerable method in a vulnerable way? And there was this massive panic where security orgs were like, okay, like I have like 100 supply chain alerts. We're gonna have to fix them all. We have no idea which ones are actually vulnerable, but we think like we're just gonna have to go after everything. Now, GitHub have released a capability called multi-repository variant analysis. So again, Richard and Bebu, if you don't mind, in maybe just dropping the link to what this is in the chat. But to give a high level of what this is, if you're leveraging code scanning and if you're leveraging CodeQL today, on the default branch, what GitHub is doing is when you run CodeQL, I mentioned earlier, we go in and we treat your code as data. So we build a database, a data representation of your code, and we then run CodeQL on that database. It allows us to be a bit more accurate with the results. Now, with multi-repo variant analysis, we have actually been storing the latest version of that database that you have been running CodeQL on. Think of it more like a data structure. And with multi-repo variant analysis, you can run a single query across all of them databases. So if you've been running CodeQL on 10,000 repos in your organization, again, we now have the latest version of them databases. So let's say when the next Log4j vulnerability comes out and your CISO or your head of security comes to you and says, hey, like, where is this vulnerability in our source code? what the value of multi-repo variant analysis is, again, GitHub may go out and be like, hey, here is a query to find this type of vulnerability, this pattern in this application. So you can write your own query, or you can leverage one that GitHub has provided. You can plug it in to multi-repo variant analysis, and we will look through each one of them databases and see if you have any type of vulnerability. So again, we have a CodeQL query for log4j. You can plug that straight into multi-repo variant analysis, and you can go out there and you can see where your vulnerabilities are. Amazing. So again, no, you're fine, Senna. I think that is a really nice example of a capability where, again, you may not be able to go out there and you may not know how to write that query, but because CodeQL is open, we're actually able to go out there, and you're able to go out there and see all of our queries, and you can leverage the ones that we provide, or you can leverage the ones that the community have provided. And a great example of this is when log4j did come out, we actually had an external contribution from a security researcher that made a PR into CodeQL for log4j. They said, hey, I've built a query for this. Amazing. So you can actually, you don't have to wait. You don't have to message your security tooling company and be like, hey, when are you getting a vulnerability out? You can just go to our public repo and you can actually see where that vulnerability is. So that's just one example of how you can use multi-repo variant analysis. There are many different ways. If you have a bug bounty program, and again, you get a submission and you want to write a query that finds all of the types of that bug bounty, you can then run it across all of your code bases. You can then patch all the vulnerabilities and then honor the bug bounty program. So there are really nice and various ways for you to be able to leverage that.
Yeah, and Manu from the chat actually asked, does it mean that you'd run a query across your whole org for a specific vulnerability? And that's exactly what this can help you with. Yeah,
exactly. That is you can of course run CodeQL with all of our queries in it. So again, you can run it across everything. But again, if you have the next log4j or the next big vulnerability, you don't have to go to every repo and kick off a scan, or go to your tool and kick off a scan for every single repo, for every single result. It's going to take a long amount of time. The value of multi-repo variant analysis is, again, you can go ahead and you can write your own query, for example, to find whatever type of pattern in your code base. So again, one example is a vulnerability, but you may look for a specific header. Again, like CodeQL is a query language, so you can really make it search for anything. And multi-repo variant analysis is what enables it at scale. So that is what makes this usable. Really good question.
You know what I also remembered is a customer one time asked me if they could search for foul language with the CodeQL query. So yeah, you can really anything. But we'll go to the next slide.
No, I think again, you can have it search for email addresses, and again, it looks at your built code. So again, you can look for PI and logs. It's super scalable. But I think the other aspect of this is the code scanning and the integrations part of things. With advanced security and code scanning, again, we realize we are not going to be the best in class of every type of security out there. I think the person that came up on stage earlier really alluded to that. They said hey, there are so many different types of vulnerabilities. There's container scanning, there's network scanning. There are so many different types of scanning, and GitHub is never going to be best in class at absolutely everything. But we want to try and provide an experience that your developers get the results in a single and consumable fashion. And do you as a security org of X amount of people facing off to X hundreds of developers want to maintain and run 5 or 6 different tools? That is quite a lot to manage. So with advanced security and with code scanning, we have taken the approach to be open by default. One of our core principles is being integratable. So again, you can go to the Actions tab, you can go to Security and click View All Workflows, and you can see lots of examples of where you can plug in your various tools that you may be using. And you can actually plug any tool into code scanning as long as it supports Serif. Sarif is a industry standard file format for static analysis that allows you to go in and take your results from any tool and plug them into code scanning. So that means that you as a security team can leverage the right tools for you without managing multiple different tools. And don't worry, you don't have to use Actions, whatever CI tool that you have, you can leverage that there. And that's really everything that I wanted to cover in the static analysis section. I wanted to give time for questions or time or time for any polls.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to kick off a poll and also open it up. I see Kolev is back, so let me approve you to come on stage. And I am, as we do this, I'm also going to start off the poll too to see like what is the ratio of developers to security at your company.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
Hi, welcome back.
I was just wait. Sorry, I lost my thought. Right. What was mentioned was right. Secure the system as well as we can, and then bring it for anyone else who want to use the system as concisely and simply as possible. Right. That's what you said. Then how do we like take care of the problem that a certain data set can be corrupted,
Yeah, I think like there are many different aspects of this, and I think like data, there's a whole different aspect of like data security and aspects that like CodeQL isn't going to like focus on. Like what we are really trying to solve, like our main problem statement from our side is at a high level is trying to get security into the hands of developers and making it in a developer first way, whilst also making sure that security teams have what they need to scale.
What if it's a single individual developing the model or the algorithm or the system or whatever, and then they need to secure it from whatever perspective possible, while at the same time retaining access to a I should say wide range area network, but maybe somewhat planetary wise, if you will.
Yeah, I think so. There are again, like I think like there are networks. There's network security. There are various different types of security. So I think like we are going to focus on application security, and that's where a network security tool is going to focus there.
Network security, you say?
Yeah, there's various different types.
That is nice. No, I get that. Not networking in some more specificality or not necessarily.
We won't do so. Like that's where there's very different types of network security tools out there. Like we as in CodeQL are focusing heavily on the application side.
I get that. I'm still curious. Sorry. Yeah. Cheers. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you for asking. I see you have
Arno, welcome.
Thank you. Hey, Nico, I have a question. We are using our company all the advanced security tools from GitHub. And I have something that I wanted to check if it's an opinionated decision. But for example, CodeQL, you can run this on pull request and make sure that you cannot merge a pull request until a certain threshold of security is solved. What about dependabouts and secrets? I think they are not checking pull requests, or I cannot prevent a pull request being merged. Is this something intentional, or is just because it's not yet there?
Do you mean like how we do things with like CodeQL differently to secret scanning?
Yeah, and the fact that should we enforce this on pull requests like CodeQL? We can, right? We can run it. But I don't think that, for example, dependabout, we can say, if dependabouts run on pull requests and we'll tell you that.
Great question.
And I'm not sure it's an intentional, because we should not do that. We should not want to do that. It's intentional not to have.
there's a capability called dependency review. So like with Dependabot, we have a capability called dependency review. It's an advanced security feature, but what it allows you to do is on a pull request, you're able to per se say, what is the policy that I want to allow or not allow to be approved in my PR? So let's say that Nick's a developer in your organization and Nick is a naughty developer and he introduces a really bad version of ESLint or like Log4j. You can set up a policy that says, hey, in any PR on this repo, do not allow any more high vulnerabilities or critical vulnerabilities. Or you can even specify licenses. So you can mention, hey, don't allow the GLP license. And you can also go very granular and say, hey, only apply this to runtime dependencies and not dev dependencies. So like on the supply chain space, I really evangelize that you check out a feature called dependency review, because that is going to give you what you need within the supply chain space. On the secret scanning space, GitHub's principle is the moment you leak a secret, it's compromised, and we flag that straight away. You can block PRs with any secrets in them. There is a open source tool and utility out there that will enable you to do that. So as you mentioned, with CodeQL, you can natively have that experience where you block it. With supply chain, you have dependency review, which you can also apply at an organization level. You can also say, this is my org level policy, and use required workflows as the way to enforce that. So required workflows is going to be one of the ways that you can enforce that at the org level, and you can also do it at the secret scanning level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think this is what we're doing, so it sounds good. So generally, from a DevSecOps, if we want to adopt that, it's not a bad practice to try to enforce security checks on pull requests.
It's absolutely again, I think like that's a question that I think everyone in the audience is going to have various thoughts on. So I think my views on this is yes. Like the pull request is where you're going to get the best remediation rates. Like GitHub on public repos has about a 70% remediation rate with CodeQL in PRs. PRs is by far the best place where you get the best remediation. So whether it's supply chain, whether it's like static analysis, like the best place to put this is in the PR. So the answer is yes, 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 and yes. As much as you can put in the PR without overwhelming the developers, that is where you're going to get the best traction.
Okay, thank you so much.
No, really good question. Thank you for coming on stage.
Okay.
And I don't know if we mentioned this. Do we mention push protections too for secret scanning as like a cool way to stop the commits from even making it to GitHub if they have a secret? So
yes,
it's just another idea.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think like there's loads of different ways with that as well. Did we run the poll with the number of?
We did. I'm going to pull that up. We have some votes already. Really interesting to see these statistics. And we also actually have somebody else raising their hand. So Moniz, I will also approve you to come on stage if you like. Curious to hear about your question or also like what you think about this poll.
Hey Moniz, I think you're on stage.
Hey, yeah, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I can. And thank you again for this session.
Always. Thank you.
My question is regarding, replayability or replaying your code against the vulnerability. So, I mean, yeah, you have talked about analysis and, figuring out what the vulnerabilities in the code are, and especially static analysis. But we usually deal with, finance industry, and we get security reports, scans from the different banks, analyzing our product, and there they are giving us, they are replaying different data, or this is how your system is actually breaking or not. This one. I was wondering if this can be done in an automated way as well. I'm not sure if this would be something for actions or maybe workflows.
Yeah, so I think that's, by the way, really good question to ask. I think that's definitely where like actions and more like, but like if you want to replay a vulnerability, you need that environment to be able to replay it. But like what like although like most static analysis tools are very static, so like they look at the code and they run your code at like just as it sees it. CodeQL will actually build your code. So we actually follow the like for Java. We will follow the compilation process of Java and model out what the actual application would look like, but in a data structure. As like we do have a like replay on a high level, but I think like to your actual question, to actually like really like replay it and see what it looks like, that's where like the power of like actions and deploying that to an environment is going to get you the best results. But CodeQL will be able to model out like what on a high level, a true running version of your application does look like.
Yeah. And do you know any action that you would like to recommend for this?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm more than happy to go back and take a think and try and find some. And again, like I think we like if you leave your details or request a demo afterwards, we at least have something of who you are, and I can try and have someone at least try and reach out to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on stage.
You. Okay, well, these are also.
Yeah, the data from the poll center. How interesting is it?
Yeah. Okay. I thought it would be 1,000 to 1 that was winning by far, but we've got 100 to 1, so it's not the doomsday scenario I thought it was. But no, this was really great.
And I think like Philip's comment, and I hope I'm saying your name right. I think like small teams rely heavily on developers to implement security 100%. Like it is very varied. Like some teams are gonna have like 10 developers, where like you're not gonna hire a specific security person for like AppSec. And I think like you are like, but for the larger organizations, I think like you're gonna have more security people. I would be interested if any organization has more security people than they do developers. I think like that's something that like I'm always interested in hearing. But I think I agree. Like there's like the statistic insignificance like across them all is about the same. But it's just interesting to see how you have 30% of organizations, or like if you combine the bottom two, you have like nearly 60% of orgs that have a greater than 101 ratio. And I think like that's not a bad thing. It's just the reality of the way that we work, and it just highlights the reality around how we need to make sure that security is ran together. So I think like yes, it's absolutely fair.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
no, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to close this poll and get us back on track. I think we've got about 15 minutes left. So thanks everyone for sharing your responses there. And cool. So now we're going to start talking about software composition analysis.
Yes. And I want to open up with actually another poll. I'm really sorry, everyone, for the polls. I think like it's really useful to see everyone's like how everyone's approach is. So what I would love to know, and you can and we can abstract this away from Dependabot, but like what do you do when you have an open source like vulnerability with a package but has no fix? Like you have a Dependabot like alert, you have a vulnerability. And like there's no fix to it. Like what would you do, or what do you do? Like would you ask the maintainer to fix it? Like would you actually swap it out for another dependency? I think like, or do you do what like most people do and just do nothing? Like what do you actually do here? Like, or like do you do something else? Fork it and you fix it yourself. That is also a very common, we've seen that twice now. Really interesting. I think like there are like it goes to show people do get very creative.
Yeah, I noticed nobody's going on Twitter to @mention people. Nick, have you ever done that? We have one person that has.
Yes. I have done that. In my old organization, we used a package across every single repo, and it was used across like thousands. We was going to have to remove it. It was a critical risk. I definitely agree with one of the points in the chat. It depends on the risk, and this was a very high risk vulnerability. So Twitter, we went through Twitter, and to be fair, like they did then go and fix it. I'm a big believer in like our open source community does this on the back of their heart, and they do it with their heart on their sleeve. So I don't want to bug, but that was I did do that once. Yes.
I see a question from the chat actually that I'd like to answer that I think is a really good thought. So Marco asked, is security really that big of a deal everywhere? I understand it's really important in servers, systems, networks, etc. But in some simple programs like music players that are only playing audio as a feature, is security necessary in this case? And I say it absolutely is. Like maybe a repository could be compromised somewhere. Maybe somebody leaves tokens into a repo, and that could really affect the system, and it could really like expose some data that you really don't want to be exposing. So yeah, I like to think that it's important in any application. Would you agree with that, Nick?
Yeah, I think like my biggest phrase is like in the security world, like there's a lot of like people like change and things learn so quickly. Think about how Log4j was announced, right? It was announced in a PR on a repo, and it caused mass frenzy with a login package. Like, who would have thought there'd be a vulnerability in like a login package, and could cause such detriment? So I think like I agree with the premise of your question. Like, is security really needed? My answer would be yes, just due to how quickly the security world is evolving and actually changing. So like that's why like protecting everything is super important. And the responses, by the way, I'm really proud of it, of everyone that like drops an issue on GitHub. That's absolutely the first thing that I would do going forward. And also, if there is no fix, swapping out the dependency based on the risk, based on the license. I think like it's like seeing everyone's thoughts in the channel. Definitely agreed with.
Great. I am going to share the deck again since we've got about 10 minutes left.
I know how quickly, like we're already 15 minutes in.
There's so many questions I want to answer.
I know. So we're gonna have to move through this section pretty quickly. But I want to remain on the same premise of data, but in the supply chain world. So a lot of you may or may not know, GitHub has its own advisory database. And you can see that by going to Google and typing in GitHub advisory database. And you can see our advisory database and all the advisories that we have reviewed and put in to our database. It's free. It's open source. Again, like similar to a lot of things that GitHub does, these open source maintainers write code in their spare time. Not many of them do it for a full-time job. So we believe they don't intentionally write vulnerabilities. So how can GitHub support and leverage that open source community in an as well open way? So we have our advisory database. It's maintained by GitHub with a full-time dedicated creation lab, which is part of our amazing security lab team. And again, because GitHub is the open source software and the home for open source, we have a built-in disclosure workflow. And with all of that, in 2022, we had a fantastic year when it came to new advisories in our database issued with new CVEs. So Senna, if you can move on to the next slide. This slide really goes to show the predominance and the impact that actually running in an open source way of working really has. In 2022, GitHub issued more CVEs than any other security vendor, specifically in the OSS space. And you can see like we were between 1,000 and 1,500 CVEs that we have actually issued in 2022. And that's why for new vulnerabilities, we are really proud of the work that we have tried to do to make the disclosure process easier, but also to leverage open source. No company is perfect, and we want to make sure that we have the best data that we can give people. And that's why I really want to highlight two core capabilities that came to our advisory database last year. So Senna, if you can move on to the next slide. One of the key capabilities was a feature called community contributions. And my ask to everyone in this audience, if ever you see any issue with our advisory database, or if you see any dependable alert or anything that doesn't feel quite right and you think it can be better, leverage community contributions. So what it is we open source and we disclose all information about our advisories. And let's say you get a dependable alert and you think the description isn't good enough, or you're like, hey, there's not a fix for this in this advisory, but I actually know there is a fix. How can I update this? With a normal security tool, you have to contact them, get an email off, ask them to update it. We'll do it in a week. But why can't people do that themselves? With GitHub, you absolutely can. If you see a description or a version that isn't quite right, go ahead and open a pull request. So if you go to our advisory database today and click on an advisory, on the bottom right-hand side, you can actually see the contribute button. Now, again, only do that if you actually see something that needs to be improved. What will happen is a pull request will be made to our curation team, and our curation team will review that, make sure everything is absolutely correct and the right changes to make. And again, if it's good, we'll approve it and we'll merge it in for the benefit of everyone. So this is one example of how we can leverage the community to have better software. And again, as we move on to my final few slides, this feature is definitely close to home. And it's called PVR, Private Vulnerability Reporting. So again, GitHub is the home of open source software. And the biggest problem we had is security researchers didn't have a good place to go to tell a package there was a vulnerability. Go back to Log4j. Log4j was disclosed in a pull request that caused absolute mass havoc. With PVR, with Private Vulnerability Reporting, security researchers are able to disclose vulnerabilities directly within GitHub. And again, like that is one of our key capabilities. Again, we're trying to make the disclosure process easier. We're trying to make sure that everyone is able to disclose and update vulnerabilities for the power of open source. Let's leverage all of you that, again, like you're all out there using these tools. You can contribute back and you can make these tools better and better. And I think like that really focuses on on the key supply chain asks. Amazing.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Any questions from anyone in the audience, or should we get on to the final few slides, Senna?
I do see one question that was raised about is GitHub Advanced Security not using the engine of Snyk or white source in the background? And I believe this refers to specifically our dependency graph scanning tools. And I think the answer is no, right? We're not using any white source data.
Snyk and white source are fantastic tools. I think like one thing that you'll never hear from GitHub or really any security company is saying these tools are bad. These tools are fantastic, really good tools, but we do not use Snyk or white source as our open source data engine. No, we have our own advisory database and we have our own scanning service with Dependabot. Really good question, but no, we do not.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think it's a good time for us to wrap up then with a few more housekeeping items. Oh, you had a conclusion, Nick.
You're fine. I think I just want to say we spoke a lot about data in this talk, and whilst data isn't everything, data is at the heart of the security tool, and that's why GitHub is going to do everything in its power to make sure that we leverage the open source community to have the best new data as we possibly can. We will make sure that, again, we have a great remediation experience, but if you don't have the data to remediate on, there's not much to it. we will continue to make sure that you have an easy enablement experience. But once you enable, if you have nothing to actually find, the enablement experience isn't quite there. Same with detection and same with coverage. So we will continue to grow. And again, I will finish myself on the quote that I mentioned earlier. If you take one thing away, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That is definitely a principle and a motto that we hold very tight to our chests here. But yeah, I think that's really everything that I wanted to cover. I really hope people have found one nugget to take away and go away and investigate or learn from. But from my side, thank you ever so much. Senna, I will let you do any final concluding remarks.
Yeah, I just want to echo that message, thanking everyone for coming on stage like throughout and asking really great questions. And it was really nice learning from you all. And yeah, last few slides. So we're on day 2 for security. There's a great session tomorrow at the same time about collaboration. So I encourage you to join those sessions as well. And we would love to hear from you and get your feedback. So someone is going to be sharing a link to the survey in the chat. So yeah, feel free to share your feedback with us. And once again, just want to thank you all for joining. This has been great.
It really has. And Senna, thank you. Thank you for being an amazing host. I think there's a lot of thanks in the audience, and that's a lot down to being an amazing host. So yes, thank you, Senna, and thank you, audience, and thank you to everyone that came on stage. I am looking forward to the sessions tomorrow. That is going to be exciting. So yes, really, really excited, and hopefully people learned a little bit from the session too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. I really loved all the content you talked through. But all right, have a great rest of your week, everyone, and hope you have a great Friday tomorrow.